was very interesting getting to talk to Mr. Rajiv Jain. Perhaps this is the first time he's doing a podcast.
I know this is the first time, Safi, you looked me into it.
Well, I'm also doing it for the first time, sir. The concept of multilateralism, bilateralism, that when talks are going on and you're close to finalizing a deal and then you go and just bomb whoever you're talking to. And so is this the breakout of World War III?
It's not the break.
There's one superpower in a small country like Ukraine, which held it back. So you're assuming that this one will also hold this superpower back.
There are various ways of war.
Possibility of Iran, even though it's degraded to some extent, it may be degraded even more in its military capacity, but its ability to sit at the top of the Strait of Hormuz might encourage it to be like the Houthis in Yemen.
Not necessarily so, but at the same time, the threat itself is a potent one. And the potency of the threat also has its repercussions without implementation of the threat.
Mr. Trump at that time had operated against the interests of Pakistan to the extent of putting them on a grey list of the FATF and threatening them with a blacklist. And now Pakistan's general, not even as president, but the general is having lunch with the same president. But where does that leave Pakistan?
But Safi, don't credit Trump with the grey list. It is Safi Rizvi who was a major player in handling that FATF. You did a superb job.
Welcome to our viewers. This is the first podcast in a series called Risk and Resilience. It is being done for the Policy Perspectives Foundation. And in the first podcast, we are extremely privileged to have Mr. Rajiv Jain, former Director of Intelligence Bureau, with us. And he is going to basically speak with us on current events that are going on globally, especially the kinetic kind. Mr. Jain is a former IPS officer of the 1980 batch, and he was from the Bihar-Jharkhand cadre. He worked for several years in Bihar in 4 districts as superintendent of police. Then he joined the Intelligence Bureau, worked in J&K, worked on several urban agglomerations, and did about 30 years of work in the Intelligence Bureau. And he rose to become the Director of Intelligence Bureau, from which he retired. After which he did 3 years as member of the National Human Rights Commission. And now he's a much retired man, so he has found time for us. So thank you for listeners to be with us. Welcome, sir. It is a great pleasure to be meeting you and chatting with you after a fairly long time on a formal basis, given that we used to meet in your office on a regular basis.
Safi, it's always such a pleasure to meet you, and I must thank you, and it's my privilege to be here for your talk.
So very kind of you, sir. So we'll just go straight and dive into what the whole world is right now discussing. And we would also like to come into this discussion just to bring in a perspective as to what the policy part is.
Will you dive as fast and as deep as Trump has done?
Mr. Trump is free to do his own thing, so we are all in our own small world. We shall try and make sense of what's going on. So the first question, sir, is that what is being discussed as geopolitics and various kinds of strategies, and everybody keeps writing about it. And we heard of it, we saw it in Gaza, we saw it in Ukraine, and we're now seeing it on Iran. Isn't it all just basically benefiting the military-industrial complex that benefits from more wars? Every real war is where all these equipments are tested and all their shortcomings are papered over finally, and new research is done. And then more money begets more money. So this military-industrial complex is the real winner of all these 3 recent events. So are we, is there any way out of this, or is this the end of the world which is close to us?
Of course, yes. Military-industrial complex is a big winner in such things. But at the same time, on the flip side, military expansion in military or creativity in military also results in civilian usages. Internet, for instance. Internet was initially a limited defense experiment, which subsequently metamorphosed into changing yours and mine lives. But at the same time, there's no gainsaying that wars ultimately benefit military-industrial complexes. But there are other forces at work. In Vietnam, if you recall, immense amount of domestic opposition, political opposition, forced the US into withdrawing. There's also political power, public opinion, and other issues associated with this. So it's not that military industrial complex is the only beneficiary. Ultimately, politics, strategy, people's opinions, all these things are impacted.
The concept of multilateralism, bilateralism, that when talks are going on and you're at close to finalizing a deal and then you go and just bomb whoever you're talking to and essentially shoot the table. So these kind of things are normally not known, but the only two other times they were seen in the past were most likely before World War One and before World War Two. So is this the breakout of World War Three?
It's not the breakout of World War III. It's good rhetoric, but on the plane of analysis, it misses out. What is relevant is that it's a multipolar world now. There are several axes. And within the earlier alliances, you would find schisms, you would find alternate thinking points and alternate viewpoints. For instance, NATO. There are alternate voices in that. Speeches during the Davos summit were pretty revealing. They manifested a line of thinking which was not in conformity with what earlier people thought, that the Western white world is united. So it's a complex world. It's a complex situation. It's a multipolar world. And these kind of disturbances, wars, etc., are there, but they would remain relatively confined to serving limited interests.
So, but if you see that on one end now, there's an increasing collection of the US with occasionally the European Union with them, including the UK, and the rest of the world, as in Iran or Iran, Russia, China. These are generally kind of talking and being with each other. So, if in the event this war goes on for another 15 days, 20 days, because most of the oil now, earlier 20 years ago, most of the oil used to go to US and Europe. Before that, it used to fuel the entire Royal Navy, the British Navy, prior to World War II and during World War II. Now all the oil is bought by China, India, South Korea, Japan. So if they keep getting restricted in the oil and gas that they are buying, how long is this going to continue? Will they not come back to intervene?
So there are different ways of interventions. You may have heard about the China. There's some talk about China also, Pakistan also intervening. But diplomatically, the canvas is pretty wide. The spectrum has several shades of gray. So you can intervene through calculative restraint. You can intervene through other means. And ultimately, yes, the impact of the Strait of Hormuz impacting the supply of energy or oil to these countries, particularly India and China, will definitely have an impact on
So
that.
aren't you being optimistic that the Chinese and the Russians and even the Indians might not want to join in? 15 days later, things might be very bad.
So reminds me, whether it's 15 days or not, my wife asked me when Russia invaded Ukraine, how long is this war going to last? I said, oh, a week, 10 days. There's a superpower here, there's a Ukraine there. Since then, I've stopped predicting what will happen in wars or how long will the war last. So I'm not quite in consensus with what you say, whether it's going to last 15 days or what would be the impact of that 15 days. Because even in the current scenario, we have been able to get some of our ships, which are laden with gas and fuel, we've been able to get them through the Hormuz.
Okay, so that's a nice way of identifying there was one superpower in a small country like Ukraine, which held it back. So you're assuming that this one will also hold this superpower back.
There are various ways of war. So one is a conventional, traditional war. The other is feet on the ground also by a so-called invader. But at the same time, now there are drones, there are cyber wars, there are various ways of waging a war. And you can wage a war which can be prolonged. At the same time, it need not be through traditional means. We say, for instance, Pakistan has waged proxy war against India in Kashmir through different means.
For a long time.
For a long time, for several years, decades, in fact.
So you are saying that the possibility of Iran, even though it's degraded to some extent, it may be degraded even more in its military capacity, but its ability to sit at the top of the Strait of Hormuz might encourage it to be like the Houthis in Yemen.
Not necessarily so, but at the same time, the threat itself is a potent one. And the potency of the threat also has its repercussions without implementation of the threat.
Okay. Okay. That's a
Mm.
very complex and intelligence bureau way of explaining it, sir. Now let's go back to one of the main perpetrators of this whole thing,
Mm.
which is Israel. So, what do you think Mr. Netanyahu has achieved? Like there was such a dastardly attack on Israel by the Hamas, in which so many people died, and then there was retribution, and then the retribution went to a different level, to the extent of completely leveling an entire area with 2 million people. So that retribution doesn't leave Israel in a very happy spot, in the sense that of the 180, 200 countries that populate the United Nations, not many countries would look at Israel with a lot of love and respect as they did after the Second World War. And maybe they would look at it either with fear or with disdain. So, where do you think that leaves Israel? Are they in a good spot?
It's a difficult spot for them in the sense that having been the victim of a terrible situation, they retaliated. But then now it has continued for some time. And for a political person, Netanyahu is a political person after all. For a political person, domestic support is far more relevant than international recognition. If domestic support is eroded, his international recognition does not lead him anywhere. So, by taking strident postures, Netanyahu is serving to support, to reinforce his domestic support base, as also keep the coalition together. At the same time, willy nilly, yes, as a consequence thereof, he is coming up, he is facing adverse criticism overseas.
So, in the long term, it will be a
So
difficult
one would
walk.
need to balance.
Yes, yes, yes. In facilitating all that Israel does in West Asia in the last 3 years, it is Mr. Trump who's getting a lot of flack that you're supporting the Israelis in doing this. But it was all along Mr. Biden who was supporting them, and that's how it all started. And he didn't know when to stop it, or maybe he didn't want to stop it. So, does all the blame lie on Mr. Trump, or are the Republicans and Democrats in the United States and the U.S. government wholly in favor of this from all time to come?
Look at it differently rather than from the perspective of the presidents. US and Israel have long had a relationship, a good, cozy relationship, a relationship of support, a relationship which was of a strategic level, relationship which also cooperated on defense and strategic matters. Israel has had support of the US for many years. Biden was the president when the incident happened in Israel. Yes, he did give a long rope to Netanyahu, and so has Trump done. But that's not peculiar to individual presidents. It also reflects the deeper nature of relationship between US and Israel.
So the this thing that is always being said by the Americans and the Israelis for the longest time is that the Iranians are building a nuclear bomb. Whereas if they're going nuclear, the Ayatollah Khomeini,
Earlier one.
the supreme leader, the earlier one, the original one, he had clearly issued a fatwa that we did not go nuclear. And then the one after him, Ayatollah Khamenei, also repeated that. Now, when they're going on saying that we are not doing it, and inspectors that have entered Iran on many occasions, they're also saying the same thing. And then we've heard about the weapons of mass destruction that Mr. Saddam Hussein had, which he didn't have.
Hmm.
It's all getting to a zone where the believability of the expounding of a certain story is getting less credibility. So, should India, China, Iran, and all other powers that are watching this battle play out, should we take all that at face value, or just stand up all together or separately and just tell the Americans and Israelis that enough is enough? Should we push for peace frontally?
So between these three positions that you've said, one is you said, should we keep taking it lying down, so to say? The other is, should we take up positions and tell the Americans? Third is, should we push for peace? There are several shades of grey in between which can be diplomatically exploited. Ultimately, for India, our national interests are supreme. So we got to play the ball accordingly. At what position do we take a very aggressive posture is different from what is our understanding of the situation. We may believe, we may have an analysis of a certain situation, but at the same time, strategically, we may act in a particular nuanced diplomatic way, depending upon what we conceive to be our national interest at that stage.
So you don't think we should come up front end and say that we would like to offer our good services to talk for talks?
To be able to say that, you should create the necessary ground and have the trust of both the parties. If you say something wherein whereafter there is no reaction from the other two parties, or the reaction is not sufficiently strong, then you are belittling yourself. So to be able to say that also, you have to create the requisite ground. You have to be able to have informal parleys to assess whether other countries are getting into such situations. How strong are they? What do you have to offer as against them? How does that serve your national interests or not? Whether it serves your overall profile that you are striving to achieve in the international arena or not. One would need to factor in all those things. It would not be a very simple answer that yes, one can just offer our services for any peaceful solution.
But more you say it, sir, that it seems very strange that it's now almost 30 days. It is 30 days of this war, and not many voices have arisen on calling for peace. And the only voice that is very prominent is that of Pakistan, and which has, with regard to India, it has not been a voice of peace on several occasions, several obvious ones and several overt ones. So, how do you see the acceptability of Pakistan to all the three players in offering themselves for mediation?
So there have been reports about Pakistan offering its services for mediation, but at the same time, remember, it was in the middle of last year. I think it was August 2025, and Pakistan had a strategic treaty with Saudi Arabia. So on the one hand, under this treaty, Pakistan is resolved to protect the Gulf states, the Arab states, in the event of a war. At the same time, Pakistan has almost a 1,000-kilometer long border with Iran. There's a pipeline which crosses, oil pipeline crosses it. And the Baluchs, and on the Iran side also, there are some stray tribal elements which can create trouble. So Pakistan has to watch that border. It's an open, essentially an open border. It's a desert border. The coastal border is also there. So Pakistan has to evaluate its own things vis-a-vis its relationship with Saudi Arabia, with Iran, as also the US. With the US, General Munir has been having lunch with the presidents. He's now a field marshal.
So, with Field Marshal Munir is clearly only talking to the United States and Iran. There is no Israel in the mix. So, most likely, US is doing the heavy lifting for Israel. And these other countries, like there's recent information that Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan are getting together to talk formally again so that they can explain, and Saudi Arabia as well. So they will get together and do something more. So that's possibly the second formation that we are hearing of. When I mention Saudi Arabia, I come to the six Gulf nations that are basically seriously impacted. Many of them have been bombed by the Iranians, saying that as long as you keep supporting them, we are only bombing your US bases. However, they've also bombed data centers. They've also threatened other infrastructure. So is it, I mean, all is fair in love and war. So do you think the Gulf nations took the right decision when they started inviting American bases to their territory and allowing them to use those bases for aggression against Iran, which those countries did not want?
Right or wrong is historically a very variable concept. So historically, if something turns out correct for the nation, good for the nation in a short period of time, then it is right. But that same action, maybe after 20 years, because of other historical developments, it may turn out to be wrong. So, right or wrong is really black or white, really. When you're seeing from a nation's perspective, right or wrong is not really the question that is to ask. The question that is to ask would be perhaps whether at this point of time, in this current scenario, how does this relationship protect their national interests, and how do they nuance it to their advantage?
Mm. That's very well said, sir. Very good words. So I'd like to shift to now more focus on China. China has not been very overtly present in this conflict, either in words or in substance. Covert, nobody knows. It's all mentioned in some article or some blog here and there. On overt level, I thought Iran was very close to China. They had built a railway line some 3 years ago, which had gone right up to Tehran from China, and that railway line obviously has started providing a lot of goods, if not both ways, one way at least. So why has China dumped its ally, a strategic ally, who sat on top of a strait, which is a choke point? So technically, China has dumped an ally because they're not intervening. They are not making the phone calls. If not, they're not making it in a very vocal way. So why is that?
So China also had this border road initiative. The rail line was a part of that border roads initiative. Also, as you mentioned some time back, China gets a significant amount of its supply of oil from that region. And it's a long time ally. But at the same time, China's interests vis-a-vis US are also significant. They cannot be undermined. So interests related to technology, interests related to investments, interests related to trade. So trade, technology, tariff. China has also been at the receiving end of tariff things. So China would need to balance these issues of friendship with Iran, the problem of oil from the Strait of Hormuz, at the same time, trade, tariff, and technology vis-a-vis the US.
So Chinese already have some presence as regards those anti-piracy patrols, which they still continue, even though piracy possibly died many years ago. They started in 2008, and then recently they've taken their 48th task force to that region, and they are based in Djibouti. So what prevents the Chinese, even if they don't want to enter the conflict theater, in just bringing 3 of their ships to the Strait of Hormuz and just showing their presence that the Chinese are not sleeping? If they have the ability to do it, and yes, they have not intervened except in Taiwan anywhere till now, why would they not take the steps to establish supremacy or move one notch up in the game between two superpowers?
So incidentally, piracy is not entirely dead. The east coast of Africa, some portions of it, piracy is still alive. Also, another reason why ships, normally countries would fly such ships in the Indian Ocean, particularly China, is for other strategic interests besides the strait. Also, it could be dominance over the region or some such thing. So yes, that's a good question. One would need to ask the Chinese about that.
I'm sure we'll get some guests from there sometime, and we'll definitely ask them the question. But there is this summit that was going to happen maybe on the 28th, 29th, or 30th, 31st of March. That was delayed by Mr. Trump. And it was delayed by Mr. Trump, as came out publicly. What was interesting was that since the outbreak of this conflict on 28th of February, the Chinese, who used to send 10 planes on average, sorties over Taiwanese airspace 3 times a week, which means 30 planes a week. So suddenly their activity dipped. And from 30 planes a week, over a period of 16 days up to the 14th of March, only 7 planes went on 2 sorties, total 7 planes, once 2 and once 5. So all the observers who are on the Hong Kong side, Singapore side, or even the Americans, they all noticed. So it was said that because Xi Jinping, Mr. Jinping, Mr.
Was
Xi
going
Jinping,
to have a
we're going to have a summit. So he was investing and saying that I'm keeping quiet. So don't. The moment Mr. Trump's made a statement that I want to delay it, Immediately, 27 planes in one sortie went off. So, very clear cause and effect has been made out, at least to me as an observer. However, now we are again in 15 days down the road. May 14th, 15th has been given as another date. And on this another date, there are still 45 days to go. Still, Iran is being pummeled. So, China doesn't seem to be at all interested in whatever happens to its neighbors, to its allies, to its economic allies, or whatever you may call it. It's clear that its only interest is economic, and it is consolidation of its economic power, except for Taiwan, where it is happy to step in whenever anything happens. So, given that stage, the United States is the only superpower. China is not. Would you agree with that?
No, I disagree with that. China, historically, particularly after the 1949 liberation, in the first decade, China wanted to resolve all its border issues. So they resolved a lot with the Soviet Union, the erstwhile USSR. With India, they tried, but somehow things didn't happen. Now they've resolved most of the issues, except say partly with Philippines, with Taiwan, partly with India and Bhutan. But in Chinese policy, they do not want to immediately create hostilities or adopt aggressive postures on conflicting borders. Mostly, patience permeates their foreign policy on these disputed issues, except that there would be certain exceptions also, because they would believe in gradually changing the contours at some of the places. So, while their interest vis-a-vis the US is economic, definitely, but at the same time, oil from Tehran or from the Strait of Hormuz also feeds their economy. It's not that it is bereft of any economic consequences. But US is definitely of significance, but it's not given up for Iran entirely. Just because it is not sending its warships to control the Strait of Hormuz does not necessarily mean that China has given up on its erstwhile allies. Every country nuances its postures particularly in conflict situations, and where conflict is between two parties with whom they have respective interests. They would nuance it to whatever they think in their analysis serves their national interest best.
Okay, so we move from China back to the other superpower, Mr. Trump. So Mr. Trump, everybody says, is basically not following a plan. He just says whatever he feels like. But somewhere down the road, when he came to power in the early part of last year, he said that I will go after Venezuela, and he went after Venezuela. He said he would go after Iran, and he went after it twice. Once he went and then did his so-called nuclear site bombing with three big bombs, and then everything stopped, and then again. So he's basically walking the talk. So the other three things that he has spoken of are invasion of Cuba, of which a fair blockade is currently going on. On two to three occasions, the power supplies have been cut off in Cuba for a long time. And there is a lot of sanctions, physical sanctions going on around Cuba. Then Greenland. Greenland, he has said so many times that I have to walk into Greenland, and that is a big core of critical minerals for me. So, and it's strategic, which it is. And finally, he's mentioned Canada as the 51st state of United States of America. So, which do you think is feasible, possible? And given that his state elections, midterm elections are coming up very soon, which means about 6 months, do you think he will do any of these three? Or it's just, we are just flying kites here. Do you think he'd do any of these three, or he'd do something else? Because his tariff story didn't go very far. All his 145% on China and 25 on India and whatever else. In the end, it's all down to 10 or 15. There's a bit of confusion whether it's 10 or 15, but otherwise it's all down, and a lot of wind has come out of that sail. So tariff is one. And now we have Cuba, Greenland, and Canada, which are fairly kinetic. So do you think there's something else he can do, or he will go through these things?
I was apprehensive that your query would be Not whether he would go or not, but which one would be the first.
Okay, let's start with that. Let's get your priority list.
I view it differently. Trump is a politician and he's also a business guy. Politicians are smart and business guys are smarter. He's a combination of the two. So he's not erratic. From his perspective, whatever he's saying or doing is serving a purpose. Essentially, he is relating to his traditional voter base. Hmm? It is also true that economically, America has had a trade deficit, a significant trade deficit for many years in the past. And he had announced it earlier that he would take such measures to bring a reasonable amount of parity in his trade relationships. I do not foresee any physical boots on the ground in Cuba or Canada or Greenland. In Greenland, although economically and strategically it's extremely important, but then it would create a fundamental schism in the NATO also. And it may be difficult for him to retain that. Canada has been a supporter of US. It's almost the lifestyle, the economy, the businesses, the people are significantly like the US. So US. Trump has been saying that Canada is going to be the 51st state, but I don't foresee. So talking by a politician. These are at times it could be postures, it could be threats, it could be to justify the constituency, it could be justify the next policy decision on tariff that they are taking. But I don't foresee physical, aggressive action against Cuba, Greenland, or Canada in the foreseeable future by Trump.
That I see as a very peaceable nature of people who were directors of intelligence bureau, and that's a very interesting way of looking at this entire future. You're saying that there may not be anything as drastic as that. In the manner in which the kind of I would say shocks that the Indian government has received over the last 1 year and 3 months. Of today, your tariff is 16, tomorrow it's 24, then it's 10, then it's 6, then it's 14, and now there's a deal here and there's a deal there, and this part of the deal, that part of the deal. It's been up, down, left, right, north, center, everything's going on. So it's very confusing for business to operate in a world of uncertainty. Hence, any business person who's trying to do a deal in which any part of his supply chain or future supply chain is going to be linked to the United States is obviously not going to do it. So, do you think India should have stuck to a line where we just stuck to our guns and we said, you're doing an unfair thing, and fine, we'll look for other markets to do our trade with? And taken a slightly different line from what we did, where we tried to continue to talk to the American side and try and explain it to them. Because it became very obvious after some months that there was no amount of explanation you could give because they were doing exactly what they wanted. And they were saying very nasty things. So, if given another chance, suppose, there was something that we could have done at that time, you think you would have done it differently?
Before I answer that, Safi, you said that businesses thrive when there is predictability and there is a stability, something to that effect. Conversely, some businesses also thrive when there is instability and there's conflict. Because if you recall, one of your first few questions was the military industrial complex. So it thrives when there is conflict, when there is instability, when there's uncertainty. So it is only some businesses which thrive when peace and predictability is there. Some other businesses thrive in other situations. In fact, in a situation of uncertainty, the margins of the businesses would go higher as opposed to businesses in a peaceful and a predictable situation. So yes, with the US, we've had these issues of tariff and unpredictability and jumps and starts on these different issues, but I think we've handled it pretty well. We've handled it well in the sense we've kept our negotiating lines open. We've been able to get concessions on several aspects that we wanted, and I think that is the way one should go ahead.
So, final question, sir. that when you were director of Intelligence Bureau, I recall from middle of 2017 to early 17 to middle of 2019. So those were the years when Mr. Donald Trump was doing his first tenure. So taking you to that tenure, and we remember that that was the time where the United States was of great help to India and alongside UK, France, and Germany, they had nominated Pakistan to the grey list for having very poor performance on the FATF's standards. So Mr. Trump at that time had operated against the interests of Pakistan to the extent of putting them on a grey list of the FATF and threatening them with a blacklist. And now Pakistan's general, not even as president, but the general is having lunch with the president, the same president in his second presidency. So you can always call this real politics, smart politics, and all that. But where does that leave Pakistan?
But Safi, don't credit Trump with the grey list. It is Safi Rizvi who was a major player in handling that FATF. You did a superb job, a remarkable job in handling that issue. But yes, so if you recall the situation pre 9/11 also and the post 9/11. So while Russian invasion was going on, well, during 79 to 89 when Russia was in Afghanistan, America gave a lot of support to Pakistan. But having been the victim of the terrorist attack of 9/11, they also changed their version of what Pakistan is, and they also started saying that yes, there are troubling elements within Pakistan who need to be controlled, but at the same time, they've used Pakistan as a balancing matter within the South Asian regional politics. So even now, so Trump at that time during the FATF did say that yes, Pakistan should be brought onto the grey list. So America would view it from its perspectives. So it would tell India it's a very good friend, but at the same time, societies or NGOs in the US would criticize India on the ground of religious freedom or some such thing. So these kind of handles are created by countries, particularly countries which are big or strong. They are created by countries so that they can use them at a suitable point of time to nudge another country into doing something what they want.
Well, great, sir. Thank you. And in a nutshell, I would say that it was very interesting getting to talk to Mr. Rajiv Jain. Perhaps this is the first time he's doing a podcast.
I know this is the first time, Safi, you looked me into it.
Well, I'm also doing it for the first time, sir. So it was a good first time for us. We enjoyed it. And you still possess that ability to think and talk in a very centrist fashion, despite my trying to and take you into different directions. So thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure for you.
Thank you very much, Safi. And it was, as always, it's very good to chat with you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.